Hello, everyone, and welcome to State of the Rum. I'm choking on like my own saliva at the start. What an awkward way to start. I'm like dying. You never done that before, Sly? Sly's already giving me dirty looks for 2 seconds into the show. I don't like it. I don't like it. Anyway, for this week, we're actually doing a show in preparation of some content that's coming. It's probably sometime in March. Deep Dungeon. It's been a while since we've had a new one, and we figured a lot of you could use some refreshers, tips, or even some encouragement to go back into the old ones before Eureka Orthos hits in patch 6.35. For that, we're going to need a few people to talk about it. I'm one of them, Mr. Happy, and joining me and with his disgusted look on his face is Sly. How you doing?
Don't die.
Don't die? Is that it? You're just disgusted at me because you thought I might die?
Yeah, I feel like that's a theme for the show in general. Just don't die.
Yeah, I mean, this show really more the topic than any other one before.
Don't die, forehead.
Yeah, just solo the whole thing. All right, and we needed some Deep Dungeon experts. You know, I've soloed the both of them once. It's far from an expert on that. So we've got some longtime Deep Dungeon community members on. First and foremost, we have Angelus Demoness, who I think we've had on the show once before.
Hello.
How you doing?
I don't think so, but I'm here now. I'm good. How are you guys?
I'm doing swell. You're excited, I'm assuming, for what we assume is next month?
Very much so, yep.
All right.
Getting ready. Yeah.
Oh, hopefully we'll get to talk about some of that preparation in the show. And we also have a few other guests who Angelus was able to bring on to the show, some more experts on the topic. First up, we have Aurora. How you doing, Aurora?
Hey, good to be here. I'm really excited for the new Deep Dungeon. I started running Deep Dungeons a couple months after Heaven on High came out, so I didn't get that new experience yet, so I'm excited for this one.
Well, we said in pre-show, I think you were fortunate to join when you did for Deep Dungeons.
Yeah.
Given how they started.
Yep.
Yeah. And last, but certainly not least, we have Finn. How are you doing, Finn?
Hey, I'm doing fine. Thanks for asking. Pretty excited for you too. Can't wait to get big numbers.
Big numbers. Oh, man.
Big numbers.
That's then making me think Shadowbringers when you think big numbers, but... You know, this the only big number I know in Deep Dungeon is the floor number, and that regularly goes back down to 1. So yeah. I'm also hoping for big numbers. All right, well, thanks everyone for taking the time to be on this show. It's been a long time since we've had a reason to do a Deep Dungeon show, I suppose. It's just, you know, it's what, 4.3 would have been the last Deep Dungeon introduction, I think, somewhere around there. So
Yeah, like 4 years, 5 years.
Oh, man.
Something like that.
You guys are champions for doing it as much as you have over those last several years. A lot of goals and a lot more patience than I think most people can relate to. Before we get started, though, quick shout out to our sponsors over on Patreon. They support us. They don't have to. All of our content's available for free on YouTube or podcast format. Speaking of which, YouTube has an official podcast tab coming. I saw it on my dashboard, but I don't think it works yet. Or at least it didn't work. So that might be the way to view the show afterwards. I'm not sure exactly how it's going to work, but just putting a little PSA out there to anyone who watches us over on YouTube that may be an option for you in the future. But thank you to all of you over on Patreon for supporting. And also thanks to SteelSeries and Advanced GG for their sponsorship and their support as well. Okay. Deep Dungeon. This is a deep topic.
Yes, it is.
That's a very deep topic. So, given it's been a long time since we've done a show, I think we should actually start talking about you three and your experiences with it. So, I want you to give just a more formal introduction, your experiences with it, what you've accomplished, any and all of that stuff. We'll start with Angelus. We introduced you first during the intro. We'll start with Finn because we introduced him last. Finn.
Yeah. All right. So I'm Finn. I'm kind of a latecomer when it comes to Deep Dungeon. I actually arrived in the middle of Shadowbringr. The reason I got into it at all, so at the beginning, I was just kind of like everyone else, right? I was like PUTD sucks, even though I sucks. I hate them, because all you did is farm the HP floors, as I'm sure a lot of people have done. So what happened is I did the Buzzer duels, thought the solo aspect of it was awesome, and I was like, wow. I wonder if there's more solo content in that game. And then I looked around. And then this is when I learned of Deep Dungeon. I had never done anything except the XP floor, and so at this point I found Angelus, right? my senpai. So I looked up his guides, followed his guides, done my necro, done my lonely row, and then I was like, wow, like that's it. Like that was really fun. I want to do more. And then, well, now I have like more than 100 clears. I do a lot of scoring. Scoring is like the whole point system in there, which you don't need to interact with, but if you want like a high spot on the leaderboards, because there's leaderboards, well, that's what you gotta do. And so that's what I do nowadays. I do mostly scoring runs and some challenge runs because it's been a few years since we've had new content, so we had to make up around. So I've done some challenge runs like walking only, first person clears, no chest, no palms, stuff like that. And that's about it for me.
Nice. Sounds like you really jumped in it with both feet. Given that's a lot of clears with only since Shadowbringers.
Yep, that's a lot.
You said you're big on score. Fuck that. I just want to sit on the bench. I just want to get to the bench and sit on the bench. That's it. That's all I need.
But
that's all I need.
If you score well, Sly, everyone will know you sat on the bench.
Yeah,
but there'll be video proof anyway.
Yeah, but they don't see that. That's fine. Come on.
Whatever.
One day, Sly. One day. Let's do Aurora. Aurora, why don't you give us a little bit of your background as well?
Okay. I'm Aurora. I've been doing Deep Dungeons since a little bit after Heaven on High came out. I started this game from my roommate, who basically had to force me to play it because I was too anxious to do things like MMO, group content, etc. I never did it. And I found out about Deep Dungeon and the fact that you can solo it. So I started it, and we didn't really have too many resources at the times, especially for healers, because that's the job that I primarily play. So I would just hit my head against the wall, failing over and over and over again, but I used to get really excited about it. And this would continue on. It took me a long time to get my initial clear, but I've actually come a long way. We've omni-cleared both Deep Dungeons. I primarily stick to healers. A lot of people in the community like to call me the healer specialist because it's all I like to do. We do challenges primarily because I am way too anxious to do scoring still. I don't know how. It doesn't matter how many clears I've done. Scoring just scares me. I want to be at the bench 100, 200. That's it. So
let's go.
Exactly. So I like to do things like Conjurer, Heaven on High, no palms on Sage no chests the last 3 sets on Sage. I like to do tutorials for how to clear on healers. I kind of fill a specific niche, and I have a lot of fun with it. Been doing it for years.
I don't think I'll ever do it on healer, so I'm going to leave that entirely to you.
I might. Not on Conjurer, though. Fuck that. That's just memes right there. Jesus.
Yeah, maybe we still had Stone Skin, but we don't.
Oh, don't remind me.
And Angelus, wrap it up for our introductions. Why don't you give everyone your background in Deep Dungeon as well?
Hey guys, I've been doing palettes probably right on the release. I got enticed to do the solo because in the patch notes they're like, oh, you can do it solo. They had the leaderboards. I'm like, oh, that's fun. So I'd been trying it ever since the very beginning. Transitioned into Heaven on High, did that also. And I just stuck with the content. We got the first clears, and then it was just like, oh, let me just try the other jobs. Then we started to just slowly and steadily get into more of the other jobs. And over time, started to see that like these guys came in, like they said, a little bit later. So the content for Deep Dungeon was very few and far between. So I figured, people wanted to get into it. They probably wanted the POVs and everything. So I started to lean more into making like tutorial guides, live tutorial guides, so on and so forth with the VOD. So my section, even though these guys are more focused on the challenge runs and getting all those scores, I kind of have leaned more into getting people in the door of Deep Dungeon to at least try it out for the first time and then filter it into Aurora or Finn if they wanted to dive into it deeper. But that's where I sit more with what I do. We haven't tried the jobstone stuff, like the no jobstone crystals and everything, but if anything, I kind of hop between just getting like a nice clear. I'm kind of the same. I don't really go for scoring, although right now I'm kind of trying to do a scoring run. But just getting to the end, just being like, this is how you can do it. Trying to make it easy for everyone if it's even possible. But yeah, that's mostly what I do on my end. I've cleared Heaven on High now 71 times. I've done POTD about 45 times. So we've definitely got a lot under our belt. on our end. So
You got to help my boy Sly here because he keeps saying he's going to do it, and he's not. I'm not seeing enough initiative from you, Sly.
do it.
Doing other shit though.
Wait, what was that? Wait, did you guys hear that? Was that an excuse? Wow.
I'm doing
Weird.
other shit, though.
Could have swore I heard an excuse right there.
Well, if that's any
Look,
encouragement.
one thing at a time, dude. Can I? Okay, let me just get my feet wet in Warhammer, and then I'll come back once we get new Deep Dungeon. And I'll be in.
And that is kind of the reason that we're doing the show. But even though we have a new Deep Dungeon coming out, we don't have that much information about it other than it's Deep Dungeon, which is in many ways kind of all the information you need about Deep Dungeons, I suppose. I'll say, since we're doing an experience, I've soloed each of them once. I watched Angelus do it for years and finally decided, okay, I should do it once. And then Magi, I believe, is the primary resource that most people use. I pulled that up on another monitor and run after run after run after run until I had sat on the bench and flew the coop, I suppose, for Heaven on High. Though I am a fake necromancer, I said I don't care about the title, and I went from 50 because I just couldn't take it. I couldn't take those first 50 floors. It's just driving me crazy to start over from 1 on Palace of the Dead. So
Also, that was intentional because I actually caught your run that you cleared. I thought it was it was a mistake that you started at 51, but it was intentional.
it was intentional because I knew I had so the title that I use on my character is World Class Troller. I knew that mattered to me more than Necromancer. So I said, well, if I don't need the title, I'm clearly just doing it to beat floor 200, to solo to floor 200. I'm proving nothing by doing the first 50 floors. So I'll just start from 51.
Oh, makes sense. Makes sense.
And I do not regret that. I regretted it as I was walking up to the bench slightly, because I'm like, now if I had done the first 50 floors, but at the same time, I was like, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. But yeah, so obviously you all have a lot of history within Deep Dungeon, but there are currently 2 in the game. We are getting the 3rd one, and we'll talk about that a bit later. So I want you to talk, I guess, about what you like about Deep Dungeon in particular, and maybe narrow down into each of them, because we have both Palace of the Dead and Heaven on High, and they are functionally a bit different. So if you want to start with Palace of the Dead, about your experiences in there, about what you like, dislike about it, and I guess how that affects what you're looking forward to in Eureka Orthos, we can start there. Angelus?
Okay, so what I like about Palace, actually, it's interesting because I've definitely done almost all of my runs on stream. So there's kind of the streamer effect of doing the runs. And at least between the 2 of them, Palace and Heaven on High, I do feel like Palace just feels and is a lot more exciting on the higher floors. The lower floors are, are kind of tiring and just kind of boring a little bit, understandable. But then I've kind of adjusted to that. That just becomes almost like a just chatting type of situation where I hang out with people, because on the higher floors I have to focus more into the gameplay. But yeah, Palace in my eyes is special because of the fact that it's marathon. It's a lot of floors. You know that if you have to go back to the start, it's so many hours back. It's aesthetically probably the prettiest so far, at least between the 2 to me, especially on those last 50. I mean, compared to Heaven on High, you have Behemoth, you have Godfather, which in my opinion are much more exciting bosses too. So that definitely kind of propels at least Palace in those sections, aside from just the overall challenge. But one of the bigger differences, especially that I've noticed between the 2, is Palace to me feels like that game mode is more in your hands. Like if you're going to lose the run, it's because you probably could have done something better. Whereas on the flip side, Heaven on High can get a little sporadic with the RNG. Like there are times that I've had runs, even if I look back at how I could have done things, it's like, oh yeah, the RNG just said not today. Like it just gave me something that I just couldn't resolve essentially. But with that being said, Heaven on High is great because it's shorter. You can do it like in one day. At least most people can probably get it out in one day, even if you have breaks and stuff. The challenge is nice because it does feel like every job can get up. You don't have like a roadblock like you did. At least in the past, there was a big roadblock with Behemoth especially. But you did feel like from the very beginning, as long as you kind of did everything well, you can at least get to the end with a little bit of help. It felt like there was more quality of life in Heaven on High versus Palace. It felt like they decided to just make some things that just felt better. Like the enemy aggro's were not as annoying as the Palace, where Palace you had more proximity stuff to deal with. The layouts were a little bit more structured, although I kind of like the weird layouts of Palace because it gave it some character. The introduction, the Magicites, whatnot, was a nice touch with the silver chest and everything. So they to me they both have their charms. They both have their pros and cons. And going into Eureka Orthos, it'll be really interesting to see. And one of the biggest things I'm interested in is just what are they going to pull from the previous two? Like, are they going to take the best of them? Are they going to try something different? What's their approach with this? Like, I think all of us are hoping that it's a lot harder than the previous two, but we shall definitely see when we get in there. Yeah.
All right, Aurora. Anything to add?
Yeah. One of the things that I think is cool between Heaven on High and Palace of the Dead is I don't think the developers, when they were creating Palace of the Dead, had the intent of solo in mind. So there's a lot of things that feel, I guess, trickier because in Heaven on High, it always feels like you have a way out with things like Conceal. So if you have a treasure room on the key or something, you open the exit, it's like, oh crap, I have to deal with this entire treasure room. Guess I'm using a Petri or something. Or sorry, Rage. But you have things like Conceal, which really helps. The way that damage is handled with bosses in Heaven on High, we've gotten to the point now where we don't need Steel or Strength for practically any job, which is insane. The way that enemies are scaled, the way that bosses are scaled, Pomanders, things like Magicite, which fully get rid of the room so you don't have to deal with something really bad. Palace of the Dead doesn't give you as many options. I feel like there's a little bit more room for skill expression. I think there's still bosses like 190 where, yeah, you might be able to do it without Steel on Healer, but I'm really not going to try that. I'm sorry. And on Melee, don't even think about it. So I like that there's still differences. There are different deep dungeons, but they still feel similar enough that if you get experience with Palace or Heaven on High, you're trying to get Lone Hero, you're trying to get Necro, that's going to carry over completely into the next one. That's why if you were to ask which one's the best one to start with first, you could give either one because they're going to transfer over. And I guess I just like the little intricacies with that and what sets them apart. And I'm really excited to see with Orthos how what that's going to add or change from the other two.
Hopefully something a little more than just auspices. Like it was with Heaven on High. We'll talk about those little buggers later. Finn?
Well, they said a lot already. But if I had to say something new, for me personally, the big difference between PTD and Heaven on High, you know, they mentioned like the RNG and, you know, like the palms being a little more friendly to solos in Heaven on High. But for me, the big thing, like the reason I like PUTD a bit more than Heaven on High is actually the length. Because me, I'm a big roguelite fan. So for me, the trail is getting very far, and then, you know, the threat of dying being always above my head. So for me, it makes me enjoy the higher PUTD floors more than it makes me enjoy the Heaven on High floors. But like they were saying, you know, like PUTD was not designed for solos in mind. So like PUTD, sometimes, you know, it'll just make you lose because it hates you. Well, that's just, you just gotta live with it. But yeah, because I know the length is often something that people, they see as a bad thing. I don't see it as a bad thing personally. But you know, like no deep dungeon runner with 100 clear is sane. So, you know, take my opinion with a grain of salt. But yeah, everything else, I agree with them for everything else that they've said. So I don't really have much to add about it. And I do hope that EO is probably going to be 100 floors. I think it's actually confirmed it's going to be 100 floors because of people that are mining and stuff like that. I would not have mind if it was 200, but I think 100 is better for the health of the content, right? I think it's like the majority of people are going to enjoy it more if it's 100 floors compared to 200 or more. So.
No, Happy. We had the conversation about like rating and mental health. And this is completely different. This is completely different. Like the reason he said he likes Deep Dungeon kind of resonated with me because, again, like as a Megaton player, every Megaton game you play, you hate yourself, and there's the threat of looming death every time. So yeah, it's just like SMT. So yeah, I kind of do need to do this.
SMT kind of is a deep dungeon game if you think about it. Because they all have that like super long, like multi-floor dungeon somewhere in there. It's not nearly as grueling, especially given you're playing a single player game.
But there's always the threat of death. Like RNG fucking hates you.
Literally. His name's not Death, but it might as well be.
So yeah.
I was thinking about mental health in that I feel like it sounds so much more relaxing hearing people talk about like, oh, it's 100 floors, 200 floors. I enjoy this versus the conversation we had last week where it was, the dozens and hundreds of hours of group play.
You really don't really think about it in the same vein because like it's rating. You like the difficulty. I assume you like the difficulty for rating apps.
Yeah.
That's what I would assume.
Yeah.
But it's a different vein in that, this is, I guess, somehow more relaxing, even though you could lose a run just like that and have to start all over.
Well, I can give you like I'm a good example of that because I dislike raiding personally. Like I really don't like raiding, and the reason I don't like raiding is simple. It's because you rely on 7 other people. So if I die in deep dungeon, it's 99.9% of the time it's my fault, right? Oh, I used my resolution in a stupid way, like 10 floors ago, or I saw a treasure room and I could only see the point, so I raged it, and now I'm out of rages at the end, and I was greedy or something. But when you die in raids, it's your fault sometimes, right? And then you gotta like own up to it if it's your fault. But often it's like your teammate didn't go on his tower or something, and then you die, right? It feels bad. Me, I'm really not into it. I don't like losing when it's out of my control. And I know people are like they like to say that RNG is out of your control in deep dungeon, which is why they don't like losing because I lost because RNG screwed me over. But it's rare, man. Once you got used to the content and you're used to dealing with the RNG, it's not RNG is not. It's just something you gotta play around, but you don't lose your runs to RNG, which is why I got really into that content, right? It's like because a lot of roguelike games, they have like meta progression, right? Like if you clear once, then you get a sword that's slightly better. Deep dungeon is all knowledge. Like once you make it to the end, you're not gonna bring in technically either pull, but either pull sucks, right? You just get it to 99 and never think about it again. But it's your knowledge, right? Like every time you clear, you bring a little bit of knowledge back to your next run, and like at some point you have so much knowledge that. I mean, you can ask Angelus and Aurora. They're all going to tell you that they have like 99, maybe not 99, but 90+% rate of clearing, right? Like we don't fail the runs as much as you would think.
Comment? He said to ask, so I'm just
it's true. I mean, it's that question's always interesting to me because when I was diving in trying to get the Omni clear, I mean, I was failing a lot, but I mean, it was like prog, like you're just like relearning. They try to just adjust strategies, so on and so forth. But then now I had all the machinist runs because I was setting it all up for AGDQ, and I've been trying to take them out one at a time, and I have like a pretty nice like win streak with machinists. I think we're up to 9 in a row on the clears. So by taking in like the job that I'm comfy in, that I've done a lot of time on, that I know I can get the clear, like, yeah, the clear rate's going to be pretty high. But I mean, if you ask me to do Astro, then don't go to me, to go to Aurora. He's probably going to get a higher clear rate than I am, right? That was a ridiculous job. So.
Aurora, comment?
Well, I think it's interesting too because I don't often think about my clear rate, right? Like I know I do a lot of other jobs for fun sometimes, and we generally clear, but all I can think about is the times that I'm trying to clear on Astro and I'll fail over and over and over again, even though I have so much experience with it. You never really know how the runs are going to go. And so I do agree with Finn about how regardless of RNG, usually you can change your game plan and find some way to make it work, right? But I think honestly, it's really hard to give an answer to that just because I know my clear rate's gotten up, and I know that the more you do the content, the better you're going to get at it. But I feel like every time I do a run, there's always something new that I learn or something that makes me question every decision that I make. And another thing that I want to actually chime in with this comment is me and Finn. A lot of people like to joke that me and Finn are very opposite in how we handle Pomander strategies. And enemies, etc. And it's cool that you can see this sort of a variety and different play styles and how you approach deep dungeon content and still get clears, right? Like the clear rate's still high, even if you don't play exactly like the video that you're watching Angelus's guide on how to do machinists. You can play differently and still reach the top, and I think that's cool.
Yeah, these two are in extreme opposites of how they manage their commanders and how they conduct their pops. Like I would say I'm like down like in the center a little bit between the two of them, but it is very interesting to see that you watch Aurora, you watch Finn, you're gonna see completely different experiences, yet their clear rate and their chance of clearing are still really, really high.
Now, we talked a lot about solo deep dungeon, but I kind of want to step back from that a little bit because I think a lot of people watching, they may not immediately be thinking about soloing deep dungeon. They might be considering it as, I guess, as we knew it from our leveling content, as group content, I suppose. Do you have any? What, Sly?
Why?
Sly, you mean you've never regrettably just sat in 51 to 60 for 8 hours to get a job from, level, what is it, 50 to 60?
I did it. Okay, I did that like maybe for one job. And then after that, I was like, this is soul sucking. I can't do this anymore. I love the fact that they gave us access, like gave deep dungeon, that like the ability to level within deep dungeon. But after a while, it just got stale.
Wow. It took me like an hour and I was tired of doing 51 to 60.
Like I said, like one fucking job and that was it for me. Like I never wanted to do that again. But I just want to do it as, challenge content. If they attach leveling to this, Eureka Orthos, good. I mean, I guess.
They will.
Yay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But yeah, like for today, even though we have to talk about this and we're going to in a second, I'm mainly focused on the solo. The group play is kind of secondary, but yeah, let's get into it.
Well, that's actually why I want to bring up the group play, especially to them, because I think a lot of people do not associate Deep Dungeon with group play, despite the fact that it is kind of it's more soloable, and obviously with Heaven on High, we saw more of a consideration for solo players, but it in every way is group content, and at its core seems to be designed with that in mind, with being able to freely do it with a friend or two or three. So what are your guys' interpretations on Deep Dungeon as a piece of group content versus the majority of your experience being solo play?
So I've actually done a few group runs, maybe even more than Aurora and Angelus, because I do enjoy going into group runs with people that have no clue how it works, right? Like just carrying people through the content, just showing them what it's like. They have zero hero pool. Like it doesn't matter because you're playing warrior, so you're overpowered, right? So you just go through the whole thing as warrior, and they're following you. They die in one shot to EOEs. Everyone's having a good time. But it's hard to make the foreman. I don't think foreman is challenging that much, as long as you have at least one person that knows how it works. But if you're all progging, but it's a bit hard for me to talk about this because I've never progged. Me, when I went into Deep Dungeon, I did exactly like you said, right? Like in my head, it was solo content. So I progged solo the entire time, right? I never cleared in the group before I got my solo title. So me, when I did my first group runs, I already had the experience. I would imagine that if you actually prog this with 4 like blind people, it would be fun. I think it's good content, but I can't imagine that it's gonna remain like challenging the more runs you get, right? Like the solo, yeah, I think solo remains challenging even if you grind on runs. But in a group, I don't think it's the way it's supposed to be. I think in a group you're just supposed to chill, have a good time, get your bags, and then do it maybe a couple more times. But another thing, I don't think you're supposed to spam this content nonstop in a group. Even more so because you get an item at the end, right? Like the pumpkin or the firecrest. Have you ever looked what you can trade for that? It's basically nothing, right? Like you can trade accessories and like a table for your house, right? Or something like that. That's it. I don't think they really intended for people to get hundreds of these items and trade them. That's why I don't think you're supposed to spam this as a group.
Heaven on High does have that mount, doesn't it? If you collect all of the accessories, but from like 4 clears,
Yes.
and then
Yep.
something like that. Mhm.
Yeah, if you do 4 clears and you get your 4 accessories, you get the mount. After the 4 clears, you don't really have a reason to clear anymore, right? Like, at this
Fun.
point, I have 110, I think, of the riddle queries of Evil and Lie, and they have no point to me. So
Curious to see if they'll do that with EO. Angelus, Aurora.
I'll let Aurora go first.
Okay. So I'm about to give a hot take. Be ready for this because this is very different from a lot of people. I actually enjoy the 51 to 60 spam. I actually leveled all my jobs that way. Because I love the chaos that comes in when you're going in and you don't know who you're playing with, and you see them step on a landmine and then open a silver chest. You're like, oh God, no, don't do it. Or they step on a luring and everybody frantically moves around. It's always different. When you're doing a dungeon, right? It's very systematic. We know the mechanics. We know what to do, the wall pulls. Generally speaking, if everybody knows what they're doing, it, oh wait, my bad. Okay, so, if everybody knows what they're doing, it's going to go the same, right? So that's actually why I don't have much of an interest in regular dungeon content. But in Deep Dungeon, everything's RNG. You never know what exactly is going to happen. And so doing this content with a group, I think could be really fun, even though I tend to be a little anxious around playing with others, because it really is. You're just learning mechanics together. You make a mistake. Half the group probably doesn't know what the hell that was either. You meet an enrage or something. And I think I don't know. I think it can be a lot of fun with the group or with solo. The thing that I agree with Finn though is once you get those clears, you get the 4 accessories, you get the mount. I think I don't think they really intend for it to be done much longer, unless you do want to get that solo clear. I think that solo clear and the fact that they add an achievement for it is kind of like that next step if you want to go that way.
Yeah, that's fair.
I love the fact that the mentality is the same. Like,
Yeah.
I love doing Deep Dungeon with people. I love seeing them land a trap and then open a silver chest. I hate myself.
Yeah.
I live for it. Like, again, I love that the central mentality for Deep Dungeon runners is I hate myself. But I love this anyway.
What's even better is that it just sounds like a spectator sport. You're like, yeah, I mean,
Really,
I can do
is.
if they ruin it, I can do it on my own. So it's like, what? I'm just gonna watch them and see what happens.
Yeah.
Angelus?
Yeah, that's precisely that's the funny dynamic when it comes to group. I think like agreeing with these guys, I definitely don't think as the casual type of climb. I mean, in essence, I guess Deep Dungeon is great because it is very dynamic where you can go in, like just take 4 buddies and just go in, get the clear, and you're good to go, or then spend years into the content, right? I mean, even in the terms of group content, you still have a leaderboard for the groups too. So, I mean, one thing I kind of wish is that they kind of separated with how many people you have in party for the scoreboard, but because with the score, if you're trying to grind for score, you need a 2-man. These help how we figured it out because there's like a weird multiplier with the amount of people you have in the score. So if you wanted to grind out like top rank on the scoreboard, you have to be 2 because they can pretty much do as much as a 4-man can do, especially when you have 2 really good gamers. So a 4-man would just never produce that amount of score. So you have that kind of repeatability, but even then, that is probably not really in a sense it's real intention, right? You kind of just going in, get those couple clears, get whatever accessories and whatever rewards you want to get, and then you're probably not going to dive back into it, or there really isn't any reason to. I think again the rankings probably help that. Probably the prestige of getting the clears probably helped that. But yeah, the scenario that you were mentioning with the groups, I think is great because if you just take just 4 random people and go up, I mean, there's so much RNG that could happen, right? People stepping on random traps, hitting exploiting chests, finding out mechanics and whatnot, pulling things by accident, hitting luring traps. But then you get someone who's experienced into the content, and it is like you're the leader of like a tourist group, and you're just herding like sheep behind you, and like you also sound like you were mentioning mentality, right? You're like the insanity of someone who's leading it off. Like you sound like you're insane. You're like, okay, everyone hug the walls. Okay, don't touch that chest. Let me use the palms. You're doing that whole thing, and I think the people around you think you're crazy, but you're just working it because that's all the strategy that you imply with the solo play. Like these are all the things you think about. And when I do group, it becomes fun. Like similar to Finn, where you're kind of just letting people do their thing, and then if anything goes wrong, you kind of just pick up the pieces and just let kind of predict what might happen if something bad were to happen. But that does have its own excitement too. And recently I was able to go in with 4 like necromancers and lone hero, and that also had just an exciting dynamic, that you just had 3 other people who knew exactly what they're doing. You didn't have to do any call outs, you didn't have to say anything, you just go through the content and just do it. And that was actually a really interesting experience too, versus taking in people who have done the content before. So but yeah, I mean, for group play, I think on the surface most people will probably go in once, twice, and then move on. But then if you wanted to get into more challenges, you'll see people try to do speeds now. Actually, you're seeing a lot of people trying to do speed runs now, and put them up on the boards on like speedrun.com, etc. Or you do like no palms, lower aether pool, stuff like that. But that's all still stuff that you like add to the challenge. That probably wasn't what is intended for the original purpose of it, right? But it's still fun to see overall.
Between the experiences, which one do you prefer, sheep herding or experienced players? And this is for all of you.
I think they're both fun in different ways. I mean, like experienced players, you really just get to sit back and relax. I mean, if someone steps on a loin trap, you just shrug it off because they know what to do. Like each person takes to something, or everyone looks at the enemy, so like, oh, this is easy, we'll just be fine. Whereas like experienced players, they're like, screaming in the microphone, like, oh my god, I'm gonna die. Like it's relax, it's fine, I got this. So they have their charm in either way, depending on the who it is and all that stuff. But yeah.
I much prefer sheep herding personally. Okay, dude. So, I know some of you know the mammoth in Heaven on High, right? You know the mammoths that do like the trumpet, big AoE. I've done a few runs where I was just with friends that have no idea what's going on. I told them, okay, all of you go summoner. Let's do a 4 summoner run just for fun. I think 2 of them at 0 to pull. When we got to the mammoth floors, the AoEs would 2-shot them, right? Like we would just be walking around, and every time a mammoth did its AoE, someone would die. That was the funniest shit ever. I love just these kind of crazy runs because like it's okay to go with experienced people, but I would only do it if I was going for score, right? Like if I had a purpose for it. But if I just want to have like a good time, get the bags, complain when I don't get the mount, and stuff like that, then I'll just go with random people. And I prefer to go with people that actually have like no either pool and they've never went in, because there's also the chance that it's gonna like pique their interest, right? Which happened with some of my friends, right? Like some of my friends, they just dislike the content. I brought them in, they died like 100 times, and then they were like, "Oh, that's pretty challenging actually," because their only experience was the grind floor. So yeah, hurting people is the best, at least for me.
So this question is under the assumption that I have ever done a 4-man in this content before Climb. I have never, like either with friends or with random people, I have never actually done a proper run in all these years. So I can't even answer that. I have no idea. All I know is that when I do those little leveling things, I'm leveling alt jobs and stuff. I think it's I do think it's a little funny to have an understanding of what's going on in the situation, being able to mediate it if something goes wrong. I enjoy that at least. So that is the most you'll hear from me on that.
I just prefer to be alone.
Yeah.
I've done a few 4-man runs. So my first Heaven on High clear was right when it came out. It was, we made 2 saves. We brought them both to 30, then both to 50, just to try to get Ether Pool like on release. And one run was unsuccessful and the other one was successful. And it was like, that was fine. But all of us at the end were kind of like, we didn't really have too much of a thrill with it outside of just the initial like learning experience. It just felt like more formal. And then in Palace, it was brand new. And so it was absolute chaos. And that was actually a lot of fun. And that run ended unsuccessfully to a Frost Dragon, I want to say.
Yes.
Oh, God.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yep. Low Ether Pool Frost Dragon. I think just and then someone panicked and ran into the middle of the room and there was a luring trap. So
perfect.
Yeah. It was everything that could have gone wrong on the patch it came out, where it was like not super well understood to boot.
See, if I were to do this with any one of you, I have the good sense to know to stay to the walls, and I'm not touching anything until you tell me to, unless you're full impometers and you need me to touch it, I will touch it. I'm staying on walls. I'm following you. I'm not doing I'm there so I don't get fined. I'm not doing anything that will jeopardize the run.
Sly, you say hugging the walls, but in Palace, there's a room where there's one wall you're not supposed to hug. So maybe they send you down.
I'm aware of that wall.
It's like, yes. Hey, Sly, can you go check that room? Make sure you hug the right wall real quick.
No.
Okay, there was no trap. We're good.
Nah, fam.
Sacrificial lamb. But what's really interesting is still at the end of the day, I think the peak of interest on the show is still for solo play. And I know that, Angelus, I know you've dealt with this question a lot. It's an MMO. What's an MMO? Massively multiplayer online. So a lot of people kind of shrug off anything that doesn't kind of meet that criteria without necessarily giving it a shot. So
Fuck people.
Yeah, to be fair. Yeah. So how have you guys dealt with that kind of criticism of just the thing that you enjoy most being a solo activity in a game that's supposed to be more sociable?
I actually wouldn't necessarily say, at least on my end. I mean, I don't know what the other guys have experienced, but I would probably not even use the word criticism because I've never got anyone kind of, if you will, attacking me on the thing, right? More so have I seen. I go about my business. I do the content and everything. You see more people being like, you know what, I like that vibe. I too I like to be in an MMO, but I don't really like the group content. I still want to be. It's almost like you want to be adjacent to the other humans in the game. You like the fact that there's a community. You like the fact that you can run around and see other actual gamers. But sometimes you don't really want to always play with them, right? But and then I know for me, when it comes to like the idea of rating and everything, at least long time ago when I was in college and everything, it was a scheduling thing. I just couldn't do it scheduling. I like to be punctual. I like to be on time. I like to make sure I commit to things, and I couldn't do that because I just couldn't stick to that time. So rating was just kind of out of the question. But at the same time, I still wanted to play the game and enjoy what the game's kind of offered. So for me, the solo content allows me to, and specifically Deep Dungeon 2, it allows me to have a challenge. I could look forward to something that's really, really hard, but I can do it on my own terms. I can do it whenever I want to. I could log in, just go right into it. And it's helpful. It's convenient. I can play a game and enjoy it whenever I need to without having to rely on other people. So over time, I've just seen more and more people have that similar vibe. So it's really been cool to see kind of people coming together for that, as opposed to other people saying, you're playing an MMO, play it the way it's supposed to be, kind of, if you will, way it's supposed to be. So yeah, it's been actually a pretty cool experience just meeting more and more people over time, kind of enjoying the same thing that I do.
I mean, I kind of agree with Angelus. Personally, I've never seen criticism of anyone being like, "Oh, you're playing the MMO wrong." If anything, I feel like people I was talking about this in the Discord this morning. Actually, I feel like Deep Dungeon is like a game within a game, right? I feel like when I'm going to play Deep Dungeon, I'm not so much playing Final Fantasy as I'm playing Deep Dungeon, which happens to be in Final Fantasy. And I feel like the viewers, they how do I put it? It's like they enjoy it that you're playing their game, even though you're doing something different in their game, right? But they still they're raiders and or they're into JPOs, or I don't mind. They're like, oh, that's cool. Like they're playing the same game as me, but doing something entirely different. But I've never seen a single criticism about the whole single player in the MMO thing. And in fact, when Angelus did his EGD2 run, the chat was like, I thought for sure the chat would be a little bit toxic, like you said, like the single player thing. But the chat was like, it was amazing. Like everyone was super into it. Lots of Final Fantasy players that did not even know that there were floors beyond 60 that were just super into it into the chat. So yeah, I've never seen that criticism personally.
I just remember. Sorry.
No, you're good.
I was going to say, I just remember the GDQ chat being like, GDQ, fix your fucking stream. It's lagging. Fix it.
Dude, I gotta talk. This was insane. I know maybe Angela should talk about it, but it was insane to see that even with the tech issues, people were so positive just because the content was so exciting. And Angela's just powered through it as well. It was crazy because I remember when we started, because we were, all the necromancers were gathered in the necromancer area. So and we were chatting, during the run, and then we were like, "Oh no, tech issues, no, right?" Like oh no, bad start. But then, like it kept going, and the tech issues stayed for a little bit, and the chat was still like super positive. And like you said, people were saying like, "Oh, HGDQ fixed it, right?" But no one was blaming like the game itself. It was crazy to see that. Yeah, there was a little bit off topic, but it was crazy to see that it went so good and people were so positive about basically like a mini game within a MMO, right?
I think a lot of the community perception on Deep Dungeons changed a little bit over the years since we have so much more content there. There's more people streaming it. Generally, there's someone doing it live at almost all hours nowadays, compared to before where that like 51 to 60, 21 to 30 leveling was generally what you saw. It was generally what you experienced in the game. And I didn't, honestly, I haven't gotten criticism much in game. Like, I'm sure for a lot of us, you might get a DM here and they're like, hey, I saw you on the leaderboard. How do you do this? How do you do this with Black Mage? I'm trying to actually do this content. Do you have any tips or videos or anything? And that's sort of the thing that you tend to see. I don't, at least for me, I don't see criticism. I adore that the game has this as an option. Like just the idea that there's some sort of variety. Hey, you hate it? Well, you got this content to do. Or you don't like raiding? Hey, there's Deep Dungeon. Just the idea that you can even do this in 14 is fantastic. And on the topic of group versus solo, I think even though it's solo content, it still has merit for being able to make friends or build a community, etc. Because I made a lot of friends in the Deep Dungeon solo community, and they've sort of dragged me into an ultimate as my first raiding experience. And I can tell you, it's for someone who's never done any EX Savage, etc. Doing synced ult, it's a very different experience. So I'm getting to experience that group content a little bit more nowadays, and I kind of respect it. I like that we have the option.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's the beauty of 14 being the theme park MMO that it is that like we have all these different facets of content. We have raiding, we have crafting, we have a nightlife scene. All the stuff that includes people, and like I talked about this like a couple of years ago when 14 kind of started, making the shift to more solo content. Like they included things that you can do by yourself. You can level by yourself. You can run dungeons by yourself if you wanted to. You can do Deep Dungeon by yourself. So it's not really. So I kind of get what some of you are saying, where it's not really, sometimes, you just want to, vibe by yourself and, do some shit. Like other times, you can go to Limsa, chill, see people, do some random shit, do some hood rat shit. It's fine. But, like there's something for like everyone. And then you can kind of turn your solo mindset on with Deep Dungeon, and you can turn it off with other content. So yeah, I definitely get what quite a few of you are saying.
I think the big thing that's changed and why you don't see those guys, I mean, I've been around for a while, so I've seen it's turning into a solo game thing. I've seen it a bunch just across all facets of 14. But I think what's changed, and I think actually Josh Strife Hayes covered this in a video, in that people are realizing now that online doesn't necessarily have to mean playing together. Because Deep Dungeon solo as a content might be individual in game, but everyone who does it knows each other and likely communicates in the community and is like a part of something that is more massively multiplayer. You're just all kind of on parallels instead of perpendiculars, if that makes sense. So I think a lot more people have gotten used to that idea as communications become more accessible over the internet.
It's kind of like speedruns, right? Like on the they show leaderboards. Like it's like a single player thing, but people they gather together, right, in Discords and communities and all that to discuss it. It's kind of the same thing, actually. I'd say it's pretty similar to that, yeah.
That's good to see. That's what I like to see. Now, we do have a new Deep Dungeon coming soon. As early as March 3rd, if their patterns keep. Could be as late as, I think if I'm looking at it, March 17th. I would expect it no later than then. Eureka Orthos. It's the deep dungeon that's being added. That's a kind of familiar name, but just to be clear to everyone, has nothing to do with the original Eureka. Well, there is a lore connection, but that's it. You don't need to do Eureka to do this one. And I think a lot of people don't really know what to expect outside of just, is it another deep dungeon? And that's it. So I was looking for any insight that you guys might have, any speculation, any hopes, anything that you're kind of wishing to see out of this next iteration of Deep Dungeon. Go as off the wall as you want. Go be as unhinged as you want. You may not get what you want, but you can be unhinged about it.
I mean, I said this a little earlier. I just hope that it's harder than the other two. But it's relative. It's going to be interesting because this is a topic I talk about a lot. It's, Palace was introduced. We said it before. It didn't feel like Palace was meant to be soloed. You just so happen to solo it. They're like, oh yeah, go ahead and try to solo it. Heaven on High felt like it was like quality of life kind of thing. Like they kind of like, okay, well we're gonna keep this thing going. You can solo it. Let's make this a little bit like easier, right? They added in some features, added in some things that really felt like it was the quality of life. But even back then, I mean, I think the amount of necromancers you had during Heaven on High was just like less than 10. Like I was saying like 2, like between 2 and 5. So at that time, they were probably trying to ease it in that people can probably like maybe think about trying to solo it. Now you're entering Eureka Orthos where there's like over 1,000 plus of both that have cleared it solo. Multiple people, like all these guys over here that have done it in all the jobs. And you kind of wonder, like, what's their thought on that? Like, is this like, do they cater to the harder crew? Do they cater more to still introduce people into it? I'm hoping that they go more the much harder route, especially because this should still be like side content, so they don't only have to worry about clear rates and whatever. So that's my first and foremost, that it is much harder. I mean, they've already said that the bosses are going to be a little bit more complex, and already demoing it on live letter, it looked like you're getting a little bit more exciting bosses at the very least. But anything, I hope that even with the cumulative knowledge that we have within the community, the amount of runs that we did, that will still get tripped up. Like there'll be something that we still have to figure out prog and like relearn, or even at the best to have to almost rewire our brains to readjust, right? Even if they go insane with certain debuffs or certain mobs or certain whatever, that it makes it so that we really have to dive in and try to just get something and try to use our knowledge, but our knowledge wouldn't necessarily help because we have to like learn brand new stuff to get through. And that's what I'm hoping for, that it takes us a while to clear. I think the first Heaven on High was 2 weeks on the release. So I mean, I would be happy with like a week if it takes like even someone going hardcore, a week at minimum, just for the challenge. But yeah, that's my biggest hope for Eureka Orthos on my end.
Can we get some
predictions?
world first? Can we get a world first unofficial race going? Possibly.
Oh God, that's good. I'm sure they'd love to, but I know what Frosty has to go through, and I think everyone who wants that is also wants to be in there, so it kind of makes it a little bit tougher.
I think the nice part with like a world race, especially, which we are talking about, like a lot of us are having discussions. I mean, you have the leaderboards, and leaderboards in essence, which are official on Lodestone and everything, they're recording it every day. So we, like, in essence, you don't have to go through like the tracking that Frosty has to go through with all the teams and everything, right? You just look at the leaderboard, like check the next day, like, hey, like what floor are people getting on? So at least that's nice. The bookkeeping's all done. I mean, if you want to know the day of, I mean, I guess you do have to rely on someone posting it, but at least that part is nice, that it is getting tracked on a daily basis.
I would just want the same amount of like production and show that savages, the savages and the ultimates get. Yeah, like that would be kind of nice for the Deep Dungeon community.
Okay.
Quick side note: you were talking about how Deep Dungeon, the original Deep Dungeon (POTD), wasn't really expected to be soloed. I'm trying to remember. Because, like, again, so many shows and so many patch notes. When they introduced this in whatever live letter it was, did the devs even say, like, hey, you can solo this? I kind of remember them saying that, like, hey, it is possible to be solo.
I mean, if you want a little history when it came to Palace, from what I can recall, I mean, I said this in a little bit at the beginning, that one of the things that enticed me into Palace was that they had leaderboards, so that it was already separated by party and solo. So for me, just to like kind of slap my name on the lodestone was a lot of fun. And I had dived into the patch notes before, and what I actually did not know, because we've morphed our strategies, we've done so many things to kind of get the most out of Deep Dungeon. On its original iteration, even stuff like landmines and silver chests did not affect enemies, and they patched that in a little bit later, which is a huge part of like healer runs and tank runs now. So I think they were like slowly trying to make it where like inch a little bit into it, maybe encouraging people to solo. I mean, even sustaining potions were out in the beginning. Like that took a while for them to release in Heaven's Ward. But it was really until you had a job like Red Mage that people felt like, okay, this is the job that can probably at least break the gate and get through the clear finally. But I mean, it really did feel like Palace was just like, oh, let's just have this ability to go in by itself. I don't even think the title was even available until like
Nope, not till Stormblood. Yep.
Yeah, so I think part of them just felt like it was this fun thing to see if people wanted to try it, and then I guess at some point they're like, yeah, let's put a title so that people can actually get an achievement out of it.
See, I think they knew Red Mage could do it because they added it when they added Red Mage. They're like, if any job can do it, it's this one. So we might want to put something in there.
True, yeah.
Back on the topic of predictions, hopes, expectations, again, unhinged. Aurora, Finn, we still have you two to get to, so let's roll through.
Just something back to what Angelus said about, they just kind of let people solo PUTD.
Yeah.
I always thought it was pretty interesting that they they let us go alone in PUTD, even though they didn't think it was possible. But I don't know if you ever tried to solo current expansion content, like the dungeons, the trials. It doesn't even let you go in alone. I don't know why it's made like that. Like you can't even go, because I remember in Shadowbringer I tried to solo Hero's Gauntlet on Warrior because Warrior was broken, right? So I was like, I wonder if you can do it alone. But you could not even queue for it alone. You had to bring your friends, and then they had to leave the dungeon for you to be able to continue alone. I don't know why it's made like that, even though they let you go into PUTD, which came out in Evan's Ward, right?
3.25 for the first 50 floors, and I think 3.35. Maybe it was 3.35 and 3.45. But either way, there was two separate patches for all that. It's funny because it's not solo related, but another thing that annoys me is you can't do minimum item level 24 mans even with a full 24 man on content. I tried to do that for Euphrosyne, and it's just said, no, you're not allowed. And I'm like, I have everyone. Let me do this. There's 24 people here. We want it to actually survive more than 2 minutes a boss.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird decisions that I don't really understand sometimes. But anyway, back to EO. So what I think EO is going to be is I think it's going to be Heaven on High V2. I think it's going to be very close to Heaven on High, just different commanders, slight difference. Maybe there's going to be another gimmick like the big rooms. I do remember when they announced EO and they showed the slides and it was like obviously gonna be Heaven on High plus, right? I know some people were like annoyed about it. They were like, "Oh, another Heaven on High," but I mean, honestly, I like it, right? Like I would be sad if they release something completely different. Not trying to throw some shade on Buzzja, but when Buzzja came out, I was pretty disappointed because I love Eureka and Buzzja was just weird. Except the duels, love the duels, but that's something else. So yeah, I think that's what EO is gonna be, and what do I hope EO is gonna be? Is I do agree. I hope it's gonna be exactly like the next Heaven on High, similar mechanics, probably as just gonna have some new gimmicks. There's some things that I hope they would keep that I think is gonna get removed. Maybe we're gonna talk about it later, but it looked like from the live layer that they're gonna remove the crits from the monsters, for example. Because we watched Yoshipi going through it, and he never got crit by a single monster. So it looks like they removed crits from it, which is what they did for raids, if I'm not wrong. I don't raid much, but I think they removed crits from raids starting from Stormblood, right?
Yeah, I think there's still a few bosses that crit. I remember when Shiva came back as an Unreal and she has a whole phase where she does nothing but crit. It was a big slap in the face to a lot of people because we don't have awareness nowadays. So times have sure changed. Awareness was still in the game when Deep Dungeon was out the first time, I think. Pretty sure it was. Just
I think so.
yeah, that would probably was nice to be able to stop some crits. Although I think it might have been gone in Stormblood by the time it was actually soloable. Because I was thinking of like Godmother with like awareness, and I'm just like, oh, that would be a godsend. That would be getting crit by her is awful. Oh man.
So yeah, the crits. Some things like the crits, I hope they remain, but it looks like they're gone. So I don't like it when they remove RNG from this kind of content because I think RNG keeps us fresh. Like if you can just approach every monster and you know that it dies in 10 auto attacks, and you know that you die in every 10 auto attacks, then it becomes like almost like math, right? Like you can kind of math your way out of every encounter. And there's something else I wanted to say that I forgot. Yes. Oh yeah. EO. So the difficulty of EO, I think it's gonna be harder than Heaven on High. I think they're gonna make the numbers higher and just people have done better. But it's hard for people like us, right? Aurora, Angelus, and me, because like they're not gonna balance content for people that clear on every single job and have hundreds of clears, right? Like that's just not realistic. So, like, personally, I don't think it's gonna take a week to clear, right? Like, I think the clear is gonna be super fast. Now, maybe I'm gonna be wrong. If I'm wrong, it's great. I'll gladly be wrong. But I just don't think it's content that's gonna be balanced around people that have done, like, because we're the exceptions, right? Like, you don't expect people to have so much experience in there. So I think it's gonna be slightly harder than Devil on High. I would expect, like, people that have not spent, like, hundreds of hours to have, like, a pretty hard time. But I think people like us are gonna clear pretty fast, or at least we'll clear fast once the boss gimmicks have been figured out, because it looks like the bosses are going to be a little bit more like bosses, actual bosses, not just sleeping, not just a thing you slap for 10 minutes and you're asleep when you're doing it. So I assume they're going to have some unique mechanics, which is going to be interesting for people like me that don't raid, because probably I won't even know what the mechanics are supposed to be. Because, when you raid, oh, this is twisters, this is limit cut, but I don't know any of these fancy words. So if I see a number appear above my head, I have no clue what's going to do to me, and I'm probably going to die. But anyway, it'll be pretty interesting to go through.
The good news is if a number appears above you, it will only be one number. So, you won't really have to know too much. Oh, man. Aurora?
Okay. The way that I like to put it is I'd really like it for it to be as difficult as possible while still technically clearable on all the jobs. That's kind of important to me because I primarily play a job that for a lot of people is considered the worst role to clear on. For a long time, healers were kind of like the last to get that initial clear. Back when I used to play in Stormblood and I used to fail over and over at 150, Asher was just not seen as a job that you can do it with. You're taking a party support job where they constantly with patches lower its DPS to compensate for the buffs that it gives out. And you're sitting there and taking it into a job where its damage is the only thing that matters. It's a little messed up, but I would like it to be possible, because with the new one especially, I'm going to be getting my first clear on healer. And if for some reason it's impossible, well, that sucks, because I'm not going to be taking another job. I'm going to keep going in there with the 4 jobs just to see if I can make it work. And I actually really hope, this might be slightly an unpopular opinion, but I kind of want some things like Enrages to be back, because I think some of the best community moments is figuring out how to make those work. Like with Behemoth, we used to think most melee jobs couldn't do it. Red Mage and healers were the only jobs that could do it. And over time with expansions, we kind of pieced together, figured out, oh, hey, Dancer can do this with Resolution. Hey, if we pre-pop the dots on Bard, we can push it down low enough to where we can actually do it. I just think with that sort of really high spike in difficulty, but being able to figure out how to make it work, there's just this sort of excitement, like when you're doing a new ultimate or something, and you have no idea what the hell these mechanics are, and you're figuring it out for the first time, and it seems impossible, but you work together to see how you can make it work. With the Pomanders, with the enemies, I just want there to be a lot of variety in the mechanics, the donut AoEs, I don't know. I don't know about stack up markers solo. That's a little scary, but
there's a few I think in some of the other ones. Yeah.
In Heaven on High, there's the armored guy who does one, but it does so little damage it doesn't matter. I really just want overall for there to be a lot of things to think about. And this is actually going back to something that was said earlier about how they patch things like adding the title, adding Red Mage, adding sustaining potions, because I don't think sustaining potions were initially there. Even nowadays, I don't know if this is an intentional thing or a bug, but even recently, they like to trickle in little changes.
Yeah,
like the fact that
seconds.
no auto heal. Yeah, the 30-second sustains and the no auto heal now affecting enemies. So if you step on a landmine and they're not aggroed, you can walk in their aggro radius. They're not going to aggro you ever, and they're just going to stay at 20, 30% HP. And it really makes you think if that's in preparation for Orthos or not. Certain mechanics that might exist or interactions with things like this might be farther ahead, but things like Demi-clones and such. I wonder how I'm really excited to see what's different about content that's always been very much similar across both.
Yeah, you hit the point. I was actually rewatching. You heard me clicking around. I was pulling up him playing through Eureka Orthos because I could remember some things, but I couldn't remember the exact details about them. And among the differences, they usually make a few changes. I say usually, there's 2 of them at the moment. Between Palace and Heaven on High, one of the most notable changes was to Pommanders and, of course, the additions of Magicites. By the way, before we get into Demi-clones and the new Pomander that we saw Yoshi P use in the thing, how did you feel about Magicites? Because I know that so we went from having what? It was Rage and... What was it? Rage and I feel like there's something else in Palace that's considered an I win button.
Resolution, kind of.
Yeah, Rezo. I was thinking maybe there was something else, but no. So there was Rage and Rezo, and those were kind of your only I win the floor buttons that were even possible. With the Rage, of course, having a condition. But then Magicites came around and you had a full floor clear. You could press it for the invincibility. You could insta-kill a boss, which many of us only have our first clears because of the Odin that we saved for floor 90 because we were really bad at time management. Not speaking from experience or anything. And then on top of that, then we had petrifications. We had concealments. So there's the changes to those particular things. How do you feel about the I win buttons and how they affect the runs overall?
I have strong opinions about Magicite and Petri. I think they suck. I'm very glad to see that they're going to be gone, especially Magicite. So just for context, I do a lot of scoring, right? So I'm even more invested into like Magicite being gone because for scoring, it's an awful thing. Magicite, of course, kills the whole floor. So the difference between me getting a Magicite on the floor and me not getting a Magicite is just like massive amount of points. Like it just sucks when I don't get the Magicites. So that's just like, that's pure RNG. And it sucks. And also the reason I dislike Magicite heavily is because it's not like, let's compare it to Rage, right? Like Rage is tricky. Like you rage, but it's not, you don't press the Rage and you win the floor, right? Like you gotta do the Rage carefully. In fact, people dying during the Rage is probably one of the most common ways to die on the last set. No, it's very tricky. You gotta be careful. You gotta pop your potions. Pull carefully. Maybe you gotta Witch Chain. Maybe you gotta Steal. Magicite is just kind of like you press it. That's it, right? Like you can't really optimize your way out of a Magicite. At most, you can maybe check a chest during the animation. That's about as much as you would optimize a Magicite. So Magicite being gone, well, at least it looks like it's gone. Like we don't know what the Demi-clones are gonna do. Like you said, like maybe. It looks like they're less strong, but I'm going off the assumption that they're going to be less powerful. I'm very glad to see the Magicite's gone. And it's kind of the same for Petri. Like we don't know for sure if Petri's gone, but I'm happy to see Petri's gone because it's kind of the same. Like Petri it's a little more tricky to pull off a Petri than a Magicite, but it's still a little bit too I win to my taste. I prefer well, it always comes back to that, but the thrill of the Rage, right? Like you rage, but you might die during your Rage, and I quite like that they combine the Lost and the Rage within the same commander as well. So now we have to make a decision of between the Lost and the Rage because it's in the same commander. It's also gonna bring some strategies that were not there before. You may be familiar with double dip in Rage, which is just
using it and then going up to the next floor. Yeah.
So now you can double dip the Rage, but into the boss, right? Because you can Rage on the 9th floor, kill let's say 10 monsters. On the key, then you're gonna go on the 9th floor, and then your Rage just so happens to have the Lost inside of it. So now you can put 5 stacks on the boss, right? Within one commander. So I think it's gonna be fun to optimize. I think it's gonna be way more fun than Bitchy and Magicite. And the Demi-clones, it's too early to say. Like, they look less strong than Magicite, but all we saw is a clone get summoned and put like a CC on a monster, and it looked. All we really know is that it looks like the clone goes away when you switch floor. That's about as much as we know about it. So.
Yeah, I think.
No. Oh,
go ahead.
sorry,
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Oh, I was gonna say, like, I don't know, like, if I would be totally like, I like Petri, I like Magicites. Those were my oh shit buttons. Those are my get out of floor free buttons, and I love those. And I like as a person who tried to do solos but like didn't because like I just fucked up somehow. I feel like I need those buttons. I couldn't. I mean, eventually, I understand what you're saying from Megaton's standpoint. Like, yeah, like the thrill of the challenge and everything, but I'll get there one day. Until then, give me my oh shit buttons.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I think I think Sly, Sly and Finn had definitely two big different points of the conversation. I mean, I think when you're getting optimized into your runs and you've done so much time, I think you do get this understanding of how less and less you want to just like hope that RNG falls your way, right? Because then you get the consistency if that happens. But I think in its initial introduction, I think the fact that they added something specifically to Silver Chest, because in Palace that a lot of people always ask, like, oh, why are you opening Silver Chest? It only gives you armor and armor. But now to have like all of a sudden you have this incentive to open that chest for this like super powerful commander was really nice. And I think in the very beginning, and especially for people trying to get their initial clear, it is kind of nice that you have that kind of clear all button, if you will. But it does get a little, again, as someone who started off, I think putting too much reliance on it can be a little bit of an issue because you don't want to think of it. You don't want to cater your run just hoping that one chest comes along and gives you that clear. Although it does feel pretty good. I mean, I remember watching someone who had like literally 2 minutes left on 99 and didn't have any kills on the floor and just like YOLO's chest and then finds a Magicite and then gets his title. I mean, that's exciting. That's like a lot of fun, at least on kind of the spectator thing. But I think I do like the fact that I guess it seemed like they've pulled it back a little bit closer to Palace, a little bit more strategy involved. Like Aurora said, like it'd be nice to have more things to plan around, more things to think about, and to decide on how you're going to use specific commanders and all these things, because it does make it a little bit more complex. Instead of just hitting one button, get out the floor. I mean, we kind of tell people like, oh yeah, make sure you check the chest before you open the Magicite. Use most of it, get rid of the mimics, so on and so forth. But now that I think with the Demi-clones, especially, that's going to just shift and change of how you're going to apply it. Even again, the rages. I mean, with the new Dreadnought, I mean, we have experience already how to utilize that, but then you are taking two pawns into one, and you're getting almost two different strategies that we've utilized, and to decide what's going to be the best application, and it also depends on what EO gives us. It could cater more to rage, it could cater more to the vulnerability. Who knows? But I think having that kind of thinking in mind of where the strategy will go does make that a little bit more exciting than like just a simple button that just hit a bunch of mons and you're out of there kind of thing. So
for me at least, it's kind of weird. I have sort of a mixed opinion on it. So I actually really like the way that they handled it in Orthos so far with the Demi-clones and the Rage Lust mechanic. I like that they added that sort of variety. I don't feel as severe about disliking Magicites, kind of like what Sly was saying. I won't lie, even now with all these clears, sometimes you just get that Magicite and you're like, hell yes, I don't have to use anything right now. I had a warrior run recently. I picked up 4 Odins, and you best believe I used it on the bosses so I could chill out. Yeah, I don't know how I got 4, but chat was telling me to use it on the 40 boss because they have no HP. I'm like, hell yeah, let's do it. So I did it, and then I got another. Use it on 60, then 70, then 80. It was so fun. We take those.
You're a healer, of course you take those.
Yeah, exactly. When I'm playing Astro, and I'm doing 1%. When I'm doing 1% to a mob, you best believe I want to get a Magicite or two to try and make it go quicker. And I also know, to go to what Finn was saying, though, I have done like a score run or two, and I really don't like when you don't get a Magicite and your kills are way lower, your score's lower, and that's just how it is. So that's actually one thing that makes Palace a little more fun for scoring, is because you feel like the score is a lot more in your hands, right? You make a mistake, you mess up a speed run, you have ways around it. You can still get a really high consistent score. Heaven on High, you want to get that dream 2 million. You better hope you're picking up a lot of floor wipes, Magicites, so you can get more kills. So I think it's a lot of fun. I also have a playstyle where I freak out if any of my palms are at 2, so I know that affects it a little bit. But I like that it's different. I like that Heaven on High tried something different, had things that were kind of like kill everything, but I do like that Orthos is going back to some sort of mix. Demi-clones might be stronger than like Rezo Lust or something, but it's different and it allows you to plan around it. So I don't know. I'm kind of easygoing with it. I'm not as big on disliking Magicite. I just think it's different.
So I did actually go back and look at what the Demi-clone was able to do. And we do have actually, while we only have one of the 3 Demi-clones, and I think it's worth speculating, they're all different than each other in some way, so it's a lot of unknown still. Looks like it's Doga, if memory is serving. That's a Doga clone. Yep. It petrifies for 10 seconds on initiating the fight, and then it just assists in attacking. So if we just assume that the Demi-clones, I guess at their bare minimum, are, I'll call them spirit summons from Elden Ring, essentially, for 1 floor. How do you think something like that assists a run? Like, how in your mind do you think of ways to utilize that for people who might want to get some insight into that before Eureka Orthos comes out?
So
it ain't me, so it ain't 100% helping. It ain't me. It's not an Elden Ring. Until it's you. It ain't me. So no. Go ahead.
Like, it's interesting because we were definitely eagle-eyeing a lot of the details when the Demi-clone came out. I mean, we looked at like, oh, is there an HP bar? Like, how long does it last? Is there a timer? And there's no timer. There's no HP bar. It doesn't seem like it draws aggro, although that's still, I guess, to be confirmed, right? It seems like it engaged on combat. I mean, my initial thinking with the Demi-clone in comparison to, say, the Magicite, or I was mentioning a little bit before, where Magicite, we kind of tell people, okay, well, if you're going to plant the Magicite, check all the chests, get rid of the mimics. Here, it's like you kind of want to use it as fast as possible because those guys are probably going to help you on the mimics. You pop a mimic, well, they'll just let the Demi-clone kill it off. So there could be more of a pressing thought of like, well, I should use it a lot sooner than later, and probably, unlike a Magicite, if you pick it up at the end of the floor, it'd probably be way less useful than if you just used it at the very beginning. The other unknown is we don't know what it does with bosses. Like, what is it going to do in bosses? Is it going to be a big help? I mean, Magicites, with the exception of Odin, they didn't do much on the higher bosses. Like on Onra on the floor 90 boss, it did like 6% of damage. So would a Demi-clone do a lot? Will it not do a lot? Again, it being targetable can be something that can also add in a whole slew of ideas, of strategy things. And not to mention, like you said, there's probably 2 other ones, maybe even 3 other ones. Maybe we get the mystery 4th one, special one, whatever that might be. And what they do could also determine how you strategize. I know in my head, like, I was thinking, like, if you had them as different role jobs, like if Doga was DPS, what if you had a healer? What if you have a tank, right? How are you going to plan around how to utilize that? That could change things. At least that would be, in my head, that'd be a lot of fun. If they're just all DPS, it kind of gets a little boring. But if they do different things, you probably apply them in different ways. The petrification from Doga, will that apply in the mimics? Will that apply in like some of the harder ones, right? Because that could also be a huge change. Maybe a melee DPS can now handle mimics without taking pox because they just happen to petrify the infatuation or whatever the pox is coming in, right? That could be a strategy too. So there's a lot of things that could come out of this specific Pomander. And then I guess the last one I can mention is how the RNG is going to sit, because one of the things we were talking about Magicites, even though they were that one hit button, I've had runs where I just don't pick one up. I've had a monk run. I go from like 21 to 83. I see 0, and I was trying my hardest to pick one up, and I saw 0. And I'm like, okay, great. So if they ease up on the RNG or they make it even more intense, who knows? That could also determine how you decide to use it. Because if the RNG is leveled, maybe you use them a little more than you like 1 per floor or something like that. If you have a chance, you're never going to see one again. You really have to hold on to it and make a decision when best to use it so you get the most out of it, especially for the first clears and everything.
It's a curtsy moment. It's you.
Hey, Finn, you want to go first?
Well, I don't have much to say because we don't know really what the Demi-clones are. Like we only know one of them, and we only saw it in action for like 30 seconds, right? So like Angelus said, it looks like it puts Mr. Happy said too. It looks like it puts a debuff that CCs and then puts a dot and it helps you fight. But then we don't know what the two others are, right? Like maybe there's a tank clone that tanks for you, right? So that would be a lot different. Maybe all three of them are going to be damage oriented. Like maybe they're going to all be different. Maybe there's an ultra rare one like Elder Magicite, but like clone version. Like I just don't know. And also the thing I think that's the most interesting is that at first when I saw the clone, because it takes the same slot as the Magicite, my first impression was, oh, it's the rare thing, right? But someone once said in my chat that it might be a common commander, and I was like, okay, that's very interesting, because like I thought it would be rare just because it's the Magicite replacement, but maybe it's actually very common, like Angelus said, So even though it looked like the clone did barely anything compared to the Magicite, what if it's a very common commander, and then you can actually have multiple? Maybe you can even have multiple active, on the same floor. Like I just don't know, because if it's a very common, like maybe maybe 50% of the silver chest now give you a clone, and then it just becomes like this thing where you're controlling almost an army on floors. You just don't know. So it's too much. I gotta assume too much about them to really form an opinion on them. I just think I'll prefer them to Magicites because of all the reasons I've said before.
I think one thing that's going to be fun for me is figuring out which one I want to have 3 of. So like, let's say there's a healer, there's a DPS, there's a tank. I don't think with my level 90 kit and all my OGCity regens and shields, I'm going to want to take that healer one. So if I get a 4th one, I'm going to get rid of that immediately because I want to stack up on the DPS ones for the later floors if I need that extra damage. Or if I want to take a tank so I can get my AoE going. I think it's going to be really cool to see how frequent they are. If there's something like you get 3 Magicites and then you get an Odin, so you want to get rid of one of your regular ones because Odin's more important. I wonder what the strategy is going to be in terms of what they do, which one's the best, if we're going to be stacking 3 of the same ones, if we're going to be... it's going to depend on your job. It's going to depend on the mechanics they do. I think that's really exciting. I think that's really fun. I think it's going to be fun to complain about when you don't get what you want. I think it's... I don't know. We don't have much information on it yet, but based on what we've seen... At least the first one, I like it, and I'm excited to see what the other 2, 3, 4, 10 do.
Well, we've seen very little about this, but something we've seen absolutely nothing of is if they're doing anything in terms of floor layout. Now, Heaven on High, one of its bigger additions were the giant open floors, which have a completely different means of tackling, trap avoiding, pathing, finding even the safe exit is a whole nother strategy element that got implemented. Is there anything in terms of, I guess, objective or floor variants that you've tinfoil hatted that you'd like to have seen in a deep dungeon up to this point? Is there anything you're hoping to see in terms of the floor layout changes?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm a big fan of roguelites and roguelite game. So, like, for me, there's a ton of things I would love to see. I would love to see secret rooms, maybe some kind of currency you can farm when you kill monsters, and you get a shop that lets you choose between a few commanders. Like, there's countless kind of, like, unique things they could have. I think it's kind of a waste that we don't have more than just the big room. The big room is okay, but it's, again, for scoring, it's just kind of RNG. So, it's like, it still doesn't really sit right with me. But I would love more kind of unique rooms, and it could even be just like unique room sizes, because I don't know if any of you have ever played Binding of Isaac, for example. In Binding of Isaac, sometimes it's square based, but sometimes you got a room that's like 2 squares. Sometimes you get a room that's like 3 squares. I would love to see something like that in the regular floors as well, right? Instead of just being like a square every time. It would also make it so we just right now we've cracked the code, right? Like we know exactly how many monsters spawn in each room. How many rooms can spawn on each floor, and then you can kind of almost do math for everything. So it would be nice to have like this kind of RNG added in. But yeah, just fun things that just are random. I would like to see them. I think the biggest one is like I would love to see secret room, some kind of secret room thing where I don't know, like maybe if a wall has a specific pattern, then you use a pomander of intuition by the wall, then the wall disappears, then you can go in the room with 3 chests inside or something. I don't know, fun things like that to make it more like a roguelike, which is kind of like what it's inspired from, right?
Yeah.
Secret room would be sick. That'd be kind of cool if like you're on the map and there's just a tile that you can just walk into that it doesn't reveal whether or not like you use the site or anything. That would be pretty sick. Like in terms of just, at least in terms of big maps and kind of other features, I haven't really done too much speculation on that. Just kind of, especially more so since we saw a lot with the live letter, and kind of, you know, any wild crazy ideas are probably like kicked out, you know. Like one of the ones I had was like, what if you had like multiple exits and like you had to pick like, you know, one that you would venture off into other ones, almost like a variant type of scenario. But yeah, I mean, if anything, there is a lot of, I guess, that we have figured out with the community, a lot of copy paste that we've noticed from Palace into Heaven on High, and it would be interesting if a lot of those assumptions we make from the previous 2 are just changed around. Like Finn was mentioning about how many enemies spawn in a room, etc. I mean, like the knowledge of like landmines showing up in specific floors, how specific sets have higher debuffs, and all these little things that we know of that carry over between the 2. It'd be interesting if that breaks the mold and they decide to kind of shift away from that, and a lot of that predictability that I'm sure a lot of us are going to be thinking about when we go into EO, that it's not there, that it just changes, that something is just really different into the new one. I think that would be great. I think that will be also a very deep attention to detail that they will probably, like, you know, understand that the community knows, and then or if anyone knows, and then make it even further challenging in that way, you know, new stuff to prog, if you will.
There's a couple things that I think would be really interesting. These ideas are so silly, but I was thinking of something like you step on a luring trap and you're like, crap, I need a second, hold the phone, and there's like this teleporter thing that takes you to a random spot in the room, so you can think for a second while they run after you and be like, okay, well, I think I'm going to nuke this all of a sudden. So you pop that steel, you pop that nuke, you use Dreadnought, whatever, and you just go. Just like having teleporters around the room so you can go to specific spots. You figure out where they go to, maybe you can plan around it. You make a mistake, you give more time before they catch up to you. I would really like to see, I've always said this, weird palm over the past couple of months, but it'd be kind of cool. One of my least favorite things when you do low damage is you use a floor wipe like a Petri and you get like 3 kills and it opens. Like, great, I just used a floor wipe on a floor I could have fought easily. So I would really like this otherwise useless Pomander that all it does is get a little text on the screen and it says it senses 8 enemies to open the key or something. So I'd be like, okay, that sounds like a floor wipe to me. I would like something like that, just something that can make you strategize about how you want to handle a floor if time's looking really bad and you don't know if the 9th floor you want to floor wipe or fight through. Just something that can help a little bit. Or if you want to get a little risky, maybe things like beneficial traps, like you step on it, you get 30 seconds of haste instead. So it's like, do I risk walking in the room like a maniac so I can get something positive instead of a debuff? But I don't know, just something that changes things a little bit, I think would be really fun.
You crazy person.
Oh, if you think that's crazy, I've thought of all kinds of things.
Okay, go ahead. Because I have a thought, but go ahead.
I mean, one of the most basic things that they kind of brought up are teleportation traps. That's actually something that's common in dungeon crawlers, but normally they would send you into a monster room, which is an instant death sentence in the case of this. But then I think of like, what if you had concealment and you wanted to get someplace else on the floor and you had a teleport trap and then you could conceal and step on the teleport trap. Then it doesn't matter where it sends you. You're just able to scout the floor more. I think a radar Pomander essentially is what you're asking for. I think that's also a pretty interesting thing. Could also like light up the mini map for the density. So like if it's more dense with monsters, it glows more or something like that. So you could also spot monster rooms from far away potentially, or remind yourself of where a room is, I suppose. Then also floor layouts where it's like all the rooms are separated. So it might be like 3 rooms here and 2 rooms here, and there's a teleporter between the 2. And then, so like little floor, or even just like the floor itself. You know how like between some of the rooms, especially in Heaven on High, there's like those bridge rooms between them. Imagine if that's like how it was in the room itself, where it's not just like a flat square or circle or whatever, and it actually has like platforms and whatnot. So it's not It's just not. It just doesn't use the space in the same way, which changes how you deal with the aggro, or you have to go around things or avoid traps and whatnot. So all those little things. And then even I just think of like, what if you were on a floor and at the start of the floor, it gives you a message that's like, the test of time has begun. And if you get to the end in a certain amount of time, then you either get more points or like a gold chest spawns or something like that. Yeah. So yeah, I've played a lot of roguelites and roguelites too. So yeah, all those kind of things. It's just, I just don't see them going that far or even much further than where it is now with it, as much as I'd love to see them. No jump puzzle rooms. That's something only I would like. That's not.
Don't give them ideas. Please.
No, I wouldn't do that to anyone because I then, do you know how many people just have to stop doing deep dungeons because they can't do jump puzzles? It's just, I can't. You haven't started enough to be able to raise your hand, Sly. You can't. You just won't start in the first place.
I'm worse than Yoshi P.
That's not good. He's really not good. You blame the keyboard, but come on.
I know. Okay. For one of my things, quick question: in the group dynamic, when you ship floors, you usually arrive at the same position, right?
Yeah, you just arrive in a room.
Yeah. Like everybody arrives in the same room.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
For the group dynamic, what if when you go to a floor, the effect is everybody's in a different place on the floor and they have to kind of find each other. So like everybody knows like different parts of the floor, but they don't know where anybody else is. And so somebody might be in a monster like laden area. Somebody might just be okay. There's that. And then I've always wanted this. I've wanted a reason to get off of floors quick. So what do I call this mechanic? The death mechanic. Basically, if you stay on a floor too long, something really powerful comes out and tries to clear the floor.
That's a true test of time right there.
Yeah, like that death. Like, yeah. So yeah, usually like the perfect example is like P3. If you stayed on the floor too long in P3, death would show up. So if you say like give a few minutes on the floor, if you overstay your welcome, a mob that is like extremely overpowered would come to try to find you. So basically it would rush you off the floor.
That'd be sick. I'd like more mechanics like that. This is a pretty common mechanic in roguelites as well. Like I think Spelunky has it. Siren has it. Maybe the Pokemon Mystery Dungeons games have it. I don't know for them, but multiple games have this kind of mechanic. It would be sick. And like you said, like group mechanics, right? Because like you mentioned earlier, we always think of the solo. We don't think of the group.
Right.
It would be great to have like group effects like that. Like everyone spawns in a random room and everyone has to meet up. Or like maybe even debuffs that apply to multiple people. Like maybe you and someone else become linked on the floor, and then you share your damage or something. I don't know.
Oh God,
ton of fun things like that.
Don't get me thinking about fucking Vermintide. Holy shit. Yeah, like that's another thing I just thought about. Like the what was it called in Vermintide? It was what? Basically, it was a curse that nobody could like go too far. The group had to stay together. If one person went too far, the entire group took damage. So some shit like that. It was like, God, I need to get back on Vermintide. But yeah, like something like that. Like in a group dynamic.
Yeah, it'd be nice if there was some stuff that could happen with groups. I think that's one of the things that kills me about the 51 to 60 is how or at 21 to 30 also is how it's the bare minimum. You see the bare minimum of what makes deep dungeon in those kinds of runs. Like, yeah, someone might step on a trap and die or do whatever, but it would be so much more fun if there was more chaos.
Yeah, I draw a parallel often. Because people they talk about it often. I'd say because people we got Buzzja instead of a deep dungeon last expansion, so usually people they compare the two. So when you grind out like 5160 in PUTD, and it's really boring, right? Because you just do it over and over. It would be kind of like if you went into Buzzja, And then let's say the optimal thing to do in Bozja was you just did one fate and the same one every time because it gives a lot of HP. You don't grab any lost action, you don't grab any pot because you don't need them. So you do that one fate, and then you leave Bozja, and then you go back in. You do that 100 times, right? I think if people did that, they would also say Bozja's crap, but it's not. It would not be really running the content. It's just like the way people do it. I feel like it's kind of how it is for PUTD and MLNI when people grind out the HP floors. Like they see like 2% of the content, but they assume that this is what it is about because it's I don't know, because it's popular, so it's just weirdly set up. I don't know how they could fix it either. I really don't know how they could fix it. Because like no one is really going to want to do 5 hours of a run to level up, right? So
they could maybe just set instead, and maybe they could just make the whole climb the climb, and then they have a leveling queue instead of the leveling being a set of 10 floors, and they could just go nuts with like every floor doing something crazy, but not difficult necessarily, just like widely varied, I suppose. That's it. That's all I have. I don't know how else they could do it.
yeah.
I'm trying here. I really want those 10 floors to be more interesting because we have a lot of people new to Final Fantasy XIV coming into Endwalker and throughout Endwalker, and I don't want them to suffer the 10 floor curse as I have in the past and as many others have in the past. I think they've all been warned about what it's like to spam Palace or spam Heaven on High. But I think that's the experience they're going to have. So I don't think there's any saving it.
Yeah, I don't know. Like maybe you could, maybe it could be set up in a way where every time you queue up, it chooses you in a random set, right? With maximum commanders. So like whenever you choose the HP floors, and it can put you in 191 or it can put you in like 171 with 3 random people, and you all have maximum commanders. I don't know. Just throwing ideas out there. If any of you guys' dad works at Square Enix, never know.
You don't know. Happy has the red phone.
The red phone, yeah.
The red phone, the direct line to Square Enix.
So many people. So many people are like, hey, next time you talk to Yoshi P, like it's like a fucking casual like Thursday call, be like, hey, what's up? Hey, by the way, my YouTube comments said I should tell you this. No, it's not how it works. It's not how it works at all. Yeah, I don't know. I want them to do something because I want more people to, because I feel like if the leveling floors were more fun, people might wonder more about the solo floors. I think right now the discoverability is mostly through content creators and seeing them go through it, or even just that initial peak of interest to see one of them to like even search for it in the first place. But it's otherwise the line isn't drawn from there's the leveling content and there's the more personal challenge. I just don't think the content itself draws that line well enough to get people there.
Yeah, I think I see a lot more people like achievement hunters. They're just hunting. They're just looking down the list and like, you can get this thing from Palace, and then they start engaging in the content. But yeah, for sure, there's definitely no bridge from doing the repeatable floors into trying to do the challenging floors.
Well, I guess the only thing left to really discuss is bosses. Now, you've already briefly discussed Palace of the Dead and Heaven on Highs and the different dynamics the bosses have there, but we've been very specifically told that these bosses will be more, well, bossy, I guess is the best way of putting it. That's what they said. They'll be more like bosses. That's it.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know what else to say. And we get to see the Mandragora boss, which has, it lights the things up on the ground and it has proximity AoE. But
can we get rid of Mandragoras, please? I'm tired of
this
them.
one's a machine. It's fine.
We see enough of them in the Excitotron and in the maps and everything. Like they reuse them so bad. So stop. No.
Sly, the point isn't about the Mandragora. The Mandragora is a means to an end in this case. But for me, some of the charm of the Palace bosses has always been their kind of untraditionalness, I suppose. Like they have things that are familiar or used elsewhere, but they don't feel like bosses as much as they feel like kind of micro representations of bosses that exist elsewhere. So do you think this is going to, do you think them designing them to be more bossy, which likely means more like the way Endwalker has done bosses thus far is a potentially good thing or a potentially bad thing? Are you leaning in any sort of direction with that statement?
I'm optimistic about it. Seeing what we saw with the floor 10 boss, it looks promising. We didn't see much of it, but I was already, more excited than like 90% of the Heaven and High bosses, right? So it would be nice to see. I was having this discussion with a friend of mine yesterday about how high could they ramp it up in terms of difficulty, and we were thinking like the Boja duels would probably be like top, right? Like that's the top solo one. They're probably not going to go that high, but somewhere in the middle between that and whatever the harder dungeon bosses that exist now would be pretty sweet. I mean, just to be able to go into one of the bosses and feel threatened by them. Like, you don't feel that in Heaven on High. If Heaven on High, you look at the boss as just a time sink. Like, okay, do I have enough time to do the boss? Great, we'll just go into the boss, right? Or we do the Odin on Onra. And even Onra being is relatively the most complex boss. I mean, once we figured out the strats for that, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, you can still mess it up, but it's pretty straightforward. Whereas Palace, again, keeping in mind that was not really designed for solo, I mean, it was really interesting to try to figure out through all 19 jobs to get through Behemoth. Behemoth was one that was like, you had that DPS check, and just creating strategies to make it work was thrilling, right? Like every single job, every single role type had just to develop something to do, and you had to get very creative if it wasn't going out. Early days of Shadowbringers, you had resolution plays into Behemoth just to push the damage like that much more, and that was exciting to try to do. And then Godfather in itself, even though that fight is relatively easy, we have bomb charts, we have all the placements for then, but that's still a fight where you have to stay on your toes for full 6 to 8 minutes because you just don't know when you're going to get double crit and you have to heal up. That's exciting. Like that is what I hope that you get with Eureka Orthos, that you're not just like debating on if I can get through the boss with no pomanders. You're like looking at it as like, okay, I need to use this. I need to make sure I have this time because this boss can kick my butt. At the very least, I hope that's the case. And like Finn said, like I think a lot of guys who are diving into solo and don't do raiding, like I don't do as much raiding, but I've dabbled into it. I've seen some of these mechanics and everything, but to be introduced into more complex mechanics, and even best case scenario, we get some type of solo mechanic or something that just you just haven't seen in the game before. That'll be pretty sweet to just have to try to figure out, resolve it. It becomes the puzzle like it is for raids, because that was exciting with the Boja duels to figure out that puzzle, and something along those lines adjacent to it in Eureka would be great. But then something that Aurora said was that the thing with the Boja duels is that they have enrages, and that would kind of suck if they do that, because that's gonna mess up healers if there's an enrage. But then that would force you into probably using a Pomander to make it work. So I don't know if you should go that far into like the difficulty. Like if it just cycles through a long rotation, that would be fantastic. But I am overall optimistic to see, at least from what we saw in the very first boss, that we might get something pretty cool for the next 8 in Eureka.
Me, I'm scared a little bit. It's because well, like I said, I don't raid. I love the bosses in PUTD, and I don't like the ones in Heaven on High. Surprise, the same as everyone. In PUTD, I really like the bosses because they slap hard, right? Like you're always on your toes unless you're playing tank. They slap really hard. The mechanics are not complex, but it's just like they just hurt, so you always like have to pay attention. Even if you've done it 50 times already, you're always a crit away from dying. So what I'm wishing for the bosses in EO is I just hope that they're fun beyond the prod, right? Like it's fine if they're interesting to prod, but realistically, most people will only do this content a few times. So for them, it's fine. But if I can be selfish, for me, I hope the boss is fun. The 99 other times I kill it, right? So if it's like a super puzzle mechanic that I just really struggle to get down, and then once I get it down, it's all about, be in the top left corner every minute, then it's not really interesting for me, right? So I'm scared they're going to have bosses that are like mechanic heavy, but they don't actually slap you hard or like challenge you. Or it's static patterns, which I think is a big problem in that game, but that's another discussion. Like patterns in Final Fantasy XIV tend to be static, right? Like it's always the same. Let's take Heaven on High, for example. Onra might look like it's RNG the first time you do it, but it's not. Like the orbs are always in the same positions every time, which is why I say I have not done anything. I've only copied people, but people figured out the optimal ways to stand on every cycle, right? So I just hope Like take on Ra and keep the fight exactly as it is, but make the orbs random, and I think that would become like a fight I really enjoy. So I just hope they keep in mind that the fights should be fun beyond the first time you get them done, right? That's the only thing I'm scared about. But it's probably gonna be better than Heaven on High in every way. So it's still gonna be better than it.
No Magicite, so it's already positive in your books.
Yeah.
At least for me, I think with the bosses, I do think that they're not going to make it, at least in my opinion, I don't think they're going to make it too hard because I know that with Orthos more than any other deep dungeon, they know there's a lot of solo clears. They've mentioned it. I'm pretty sure they said in a live letter, mentioned Omni clears. They're aware that it exists. And so they're not going to make any mechanics they think are impossible for someone solo. So where do they draw that line for what becomes unfeasible? Like, what's the metric for that? We have boss to jewels, thankfully. And with those are really hard mechanics, but it's doable. And I think those are really good. I don't think they're going to do that for the bosses because they're going to be thinking about 4-man parties. They're going to be thinking about solo. I think it's going to be its own separate thing. But I think for me, I'd like it to be memorable. I want to die to something I had no idea what the hell that was. And I don't want them to be HP sponges because there is a specific boss in Palace of the Dead that I know it's because it wasn't designed with solo in mind. But one of my favorite things is how long do bosses take on Astro? And I get to say 24 minutes on 150. And it's what? And you think about all those timeouts on 150 because you are not prepared to be spending longer than an ultimate on one boss fight because they heal themselves. So I really hope in terms of HP values, it's reasonable. I hope it's not something... I think a boss that's shorter but more exciting is going to be better and more enjoyable than one that's just, one that you're spending 15 minutes on. So I think for me, that's where I think about. I think about the HP values. I think about the mechanics leading up to it. I think about if it's going to have enrages, if it's going to have mechanics that force you to move a lot and mess up with your uptime. I know Honor, we used to have uptime issues until we discovered we did the range strat, and then we moved on to a melee strat, and just seeing that little progression was kind of cool. So I would like to see more of that, but just extended. I don't want to say I'm pessimistic, but I do think that there's going to be a line drawn with how difficult they actually are.
Dude, enrages would be sick, but I don't think it's going to happen again that we're going to get another game.
Well.
Because can you imagine how much of a pain it would be to balance it?
I mean, at most, something like Behemoth.
know.
I think Behemoth is the limit of what you would see again, if anything at all.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's because if they want it to be solo viable, if they make an enrage as tight as Behemoth, they have to make sure it's actually doable.
Yeah.
It just seems like a big pain in the ass that they would have to because every time they buff a job or nerf, then they would have to make sure you can still actually do it, right? They don't do that for PUTD because it was never meant to be solo. But I think for EO, they're gonna be more like they acknowledge us, right? Like finally, so they're probably gonna want it to remain soloable. So I don't think for this reason we're gonna see another Behemoth as much as I would want to, because Behemoth, man, we did not talk about Behemoth enough. I mean, if anyone's watching and you're like, I wonder what is the highlight of the dungeon, I've never done it. 180 Behemoth, no contest. Like my heart rate PB is like 183 on Behemoth, so I have a
Heart rate
and,
PB.
yeah.
Need
That fight you can do it 50 times, is 100 times. It's still always the most exciting part of PUTD, in my opinion.
I would agree, having only beaten Palace once and beaten Heaven on High once, that Behemoth was still the just starts beating very quickly when you see it at 50. You're hitting the macro. Okay, 15.9, 15.6, 15.4. What if I crit? Do I go for the 15.1 or 50? No, let's stop here. Okay. This is nerve-wracking. Well, we're coming up towards the end of our showtime, so I want to posit one remaining question to each of you. I'm sure the top discussion or the top thought you've had is what job you will play when Eureka Orthos comes out. So I think I know one of your answers, but I'll still ask everyone to answer. What is the job you're planning on tackling solo in Eureka Orthos first, regardless of how it ends up being designed, and if you make adjustments later, just the initial plan? And why are you choosing that job?
For me, Red Mage, it's mostly sentimental value. I got my clears on the job. I guess in some weird way, I'm used to progging on the job, even though it's been forever since I did that. I'm fully understanding that it's probably not going to be the best one. I mean, having knowledge on all the jobs, at least up to the deep dungeons, I know what every job is more or less capable of. I don't know what they do at 90 too much. I haven't done too much of the jobs right now at 90, but yeah, I'm sticking with Red Mage. I'm sticking with the OG job, and I'll hope to do the best I can on that job, and at least put on a pretty good show when that happens.
Okay, I'll go.
I think we know what Aurora's answer is going to be, so yeah, you should probably.
Warrior for Aurora.
Yeah, well, me, it's like I'm kind of boring. I don't have any sentimental value for any job, so I don't have a cool answer for that. Me, I'm gonna go for what I think is gonna have the most chance to be the world first clear. I think it's gonna be tank, because I tanks are just kind of broken already in level high, and they're gonna be even more broken in the level 90. Because like unless every monster has an enrage, there's just like you're just gonna be so tanky. It's gonna make things way simpler. So but I still don't know exactly which job I'm gonna go. It's not gonna be Dawnbreaker because I think its invuln sucks. So it's gonna be between Dark Knight, Warrior, or Paladin. I'm leaning a little bit more toward Paladin because it's the only thing that has chiding power, which is pretty useful when you're exploring and all that. So I'm leaning towards Paladin, and for me it's just a pure like number thing. It's just I think it's the most likely job to get a ward first on, and I'm going to try to go for the ward first. But I do plan to clear on everything. It's just the first one I'll try to get.
And Aurora?
So in super contrast to Finn's answer, I am extremely sentimental. When I started this game, the first job that I tried to clear was Astro, and I kept failing over and over and over again. And we used to say, that job's impossible. Stop doing it. What are you doing? And we learned later, I don't want to say gave up on it, but I moved on to other jobs eventually because I wasn't sure if it would ever be possible, but I know now that it is. So I'm not going to make that mistake again. When the new Deep Dungeon comes out, I am super going to be going Astro first. I'm okay with flexing healer first. I'm okay if for some reason it's impossible and I got to do it on Sage or White Mage or Scholar. Love those jobs. They're fantastic. I'll do it. But I am going to be taking what's probably going to be the hardest job, and I know that's going to kill me in terms of the world first race. I know I'm out of it, but hey, it's going to be its own experience, and I think being able to say I got it with my main, that's enough for me.
What's beautiful about Deep Dungeon is while I think everyone will be thinking of the first person to solo it, I think everyone also thinks of the first person on each job to solo it, and not just the first clear overall. So you can technically do your own world first race for Astro instead of worrying about the actual first clear.
Yeah, I actually wanted to be the first person in Endwalker to clear Astro, and I know a lot of other people know. I just kept bashing my head in there, failing over and over and over. You get to 197, and then it's 188, and you start to question if you can do it. And it's kind of, I used to get embarrassed by this, but it took me 90 attempts to clear Astro and Palace over a couple of years, and on the 90th we actually got it. And we weren't the first to ever clear Astro, but we were the first in Endwalker to do it when Astro arguably was in its one of its worst states to clear solo. So that's what I'm going for. I want to be that first healer clear, that first Astro clear. That's what I'm after.
I think that'll be exciting. I'm struggling because I think tank. I also agree. For me, I'm not considering world placement. I just want to do it. It's a challenge. It's kind of like with Palace. I didn't care about the first 50 floors. I just wanted to do it.
Yeah.
So for me, I think tank is the go-to. That's what I did Heaven on High on before doing Palace on Machinist. And I think I was leaning towards Paladin also. Warrior, I think, is probably, I'll call it safer, I suppose, in terms of if I already knew everything. But yeah, Paladin, just for not knowing anything yet, seems to be like a really good choice. It's also a lot easier to burst on now, which I think is really useful for especially just killing like any mob on the higher floors to burst something down that's high priority. So I'm hoping that that and their sustain, and they actually have a shield for themselves now. So with Veil, so there's just, I don't know, there's a lot of things on Paladin I think will be really, really useful. So yeah, that's where I'm going. I also, as much as, I actually think Gunbreaker is going to be really good. I think Heart of Corundum doesn't get enough credit for how good it is in terms of it being like an XCOG value. That being said, I just don't want to play Gunbreaker. I don't like playing it. So curious to see how how strong that ends up being in there, though.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you in Gunbreaker. It's just boring. Only because it was like the same as like the previous expansion, and Warrior, when I shifted away from like Gunbreaker into Warrior is just more exciting to play. Like it just felt more fun, especially keeping it in the realm of Deep Dungeon. So I'm kind of with you on that one. I mean, even taking it, I took it at least up to 90, and it just felt the same to me. And I understand people liking all that stuff, but for me, it was just it's just more the same. So I definitely would. I mean, Paladin is definitely interesting with all the changes too. So all the points were made were very good. So it'd be interesting to see which of the tanks. I do feel like a tank would probably take world first if we really had to kind of put it on objectively and on paper. But it'll be interesting to see which one of the four, because it probably is a toss up between all four of them, because they do pretty well and what they can pull off.
I feel like the thing with Gunbreaker is it doesn't have it doesn't have anything going on for it. Like Paladin is kiting, Warrior is just immortal with like infinite healing. Dark Knight is super bursty with OGCDs. But then what is Gunbreaker, right? I can think of it. Press a lot of buttons. That's it. Because it has a lot of OGCDs. I don't know what Gunbreaker's thing is.
I think it's also bursty. I think that's kind of its thing, is it's also bursty.
Yeah. But then all the tanks are kind of bursty, right? Because they all have like minute cooldowns and
So either way, yeah, I'm really curious to see how all the jobs kind of fare. Sly, I'm assuming, are you gonna, when you eventually get around, are you doing Dragoon, or are you going Machinist or something? Because I know you're kind of back and forth on those.
Machinist.
That's what I thought. I thought you were gonna put Dragoon on the wayside and go the Machinist path, which should be interesting. I mean, now they have 3 big burst buttons at 90, 2 auto crits, still all the same kiting capabilities. So, and they have Dismantle now, which is probably going to be really useful for bosses in particular.
I don't have to worry about throwing my controller halfway across the room on Dragoon.
I just imagine, the animation for Zir Skogul, I imagine you doing that with a controller, just.
Yeah. Like, why do you think it would just go into because there's a bathroom and then there was the shower, it would just go across 2 rooms.
See, I like the idea of Dragoon because they actually have so many ranged attacks that they can do when you're running around. Just, obviously, not as many as Machinist Sly. I'm not going to argue that. But think of all the range. Think of the backflip.
I've done this song and dance before. I know how it goes.
I have faith. I have faith in the Dragoon.
I'll try. After I do Machinist, I'll try Dragoon.
Okay. Sly already thinking about a second run. You're on your way to Omni Eureka Orthos already.
Fuck no.
All right. Well, our show's been running just about 2 hours on the clock. I think we've hit on all the most major points. I do want to open it up if you think there's a topic that we didn't touch upon that you think that maybe people would want to hear. So, if there is something, now's the time. If not, we'll start signing off. So the floor's open if anyone wants it.
Personally, I'm good on my end, so.
Well, just for maybe anyone watching that's they're kind of interested, but they think the farm floors are kind of boring. Like I said, don't base your expectations of Deep Dungeon based on the farm floors. You should really, really give it a go. The real thing, right? The HP floors is not the content. I just want to put that out there for anyone that might be watching and has a slight interest.
The only thing that I'll say is I am very adamant now about playing the job that you enjoy playing versus what you think is the best. I think if you were good at a job, you're fantastic at Summoner, but you're terrible at Warrior, I say go Summoner. You will probably have more fun. If you were struggling with the floors on a job that you don't enjoy as much, it's just not going to be as fun to you, I think. And so regardless of what people consider meta or people consider top 5 jobs, it's a really good feeling to just prog, learn, do all this stuff on something that you enjoy and have fun with. So that's what I'd put.
All right. Sounds good to me. Well, with that, we can start signing off so you can all get to your days. Thank you again for taking a couple hours out of your day to talk about Deep Dungeon. Hopefully you had a good time, a relaxed conversation about, after last week, a much more relaxing topic, which is not how I think most people associate Deep Dungeon solos, but it can be. It can be zen if you treat it the right way, as people have seen today. But with that, let's do some sign-offs. So, Finn, why don't you start us off? Where can everyone find you at? What do you have planned for the immediate future? Floor is yours.
So people can find me on Twitter with the same name, on Reddit with the same name, on Twitch with the same name. You know, kind of get how it works. I'm fairly active on my social medias, but I'm more of a guy that happens to stream than a streamer. You know, but I think I put on a good show. What I do most of my streams is I just do Deep Dungeons, challenge runs, or just regular runs. And I usually stream on the weekends. And for EO, I will be streaming every day, every hour. So look forward to that. And I will be trying to get Ward first. And then I will try to get Ward first Omni after that. I'm more shooting for the Ward first Omni. So keep your eyes out for that. And just shout out to the Deep Dungeon community. Awesome community. Also shout out to my friend Ko, who started doing my YouTube thumbnails for me. So I can finally put out all the VODs on my YouTube. I have a VOD for every job, by the way. So if you are interested in seeing what particular job can accomplish in either Deep Dungeon, you can go there. And that's it for me.
I also saw you playing a mystery dungeon game. I was looking through your VODs too. So it looks like your Deep Dungeon love extends outward, as you said.
That's actually I've never played a mystery dungeon game. That's new for me. I tried Siren, and yeah, I was like, wow, that's super close to Deep Dungeon actually.
That's a lot of fun. Aurora, what about you? Where can everyone find you at? What do you got going on?
Okay, so you can find me over at Aurora Moon X on Twitch, and inversely, because usernames are done, X Aurora Moon on Twitter, which is definitely not confusing. So I've been pretty consistent with streaming twice a week, Wednesdays, Sundays at 1:30 p.m. EST. I can't, other than the hurricane that hit and knocked me out for a month, I actually don't know if I've ever canceled a stream before. I do primarily Deep Dungeon. I'm trying to dip my toes in variety, but it's never on Wednesdays, Sundays. I continue to play healers all day. I'll try other jobs for fun. I'll do challenge runs. I'll do things that you absolutely shouldn't do. And if you want to see someone play like they've never played this content before and freak out over every little thing that goes wrong, I got you. I got the stress. I act like I don't know what I'm doing, but I have a lot of fun, and I think it's I don't know. I just enjoy doing it.
Well, that's the most important part. So
yeah,
there you go. Thank you, and Angelus, sign us off, buddy.
You can find me on Angelus Demoness on most of the platforms: Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, etc. I do Deep Dungeon currently 3 times a week on Tuesday, Thursdays, and Sundays. That'll certainly change once EO comes out. We're going to go as hard as I can. I'll be focusing on the Red Mage clear first, and then unlike Finn's going to go for Omni right away, but I'm going to probably split my time between getting information out, making sure people know, and try to learn from the content, probably step into whatever job happens to be world first if it isn't Red Mage. Focus on guides, and then start moving into kind of the Omni clear on my end a little bit more slowly. And yeah, I mean, I'll go as hard as I can. If you have any questions, certainly come on Discord, come to my channel, come to Aurora and Finn's channel and everything. If you are wanting to start into Deep Dungeon and have questions, these guys and myself will definitely get to you. And lastly, it's been really cool to be able to ask these guys to come along and seeing how the community has grown. I mean, like I said, I've done this since the beginning, so I've really seen this, how it has been from just literally 5 of us doing it seriously to now you have an entire community that is going in, and then now you're sitting in where we have awesome content creators that are doing the same content as me and completely differently, and yet they're still having success as well. And it's really cool to see that kind of evolution with the community, and I'm really happy that I get to hang with these guys. That they're basically they've accomplished as much as I have, even though they've been doing a little bit less time. And I hope to see more of that, especially in Eureka. I hope more people come along. I hope more people try to engage with it and just have fun with the content overall.
I can vouch. You're the reason I did Deep Dungeon. So not as many times, but it's why I did it in the first place. So I can vouch for that and say thank you for getting the interest up there. I think a lot of people have kind of turned to you for their initial interests into it. So as much as you enjoy seeing other people do it, we enjoy that you're so passionate about it.
Appreciate that.
And also, if anyone didn't catch it, while we mentioned it briefly earlier, watch the GDQ run. He kind of styled on it a little bit. You styled on it. You had to stop and restart your stream in the middle of the run. You're like, yeah, whatever. Okay, I'll just restart that. Totally not going to lose focus or anything like that. I'll make sure I have enough time to attempt the boss twice, and then do it right the first time. Yeah. So. It was a damn good watch, and also good to see 14 on the GDQ stage. So
absolutely, yep.
That's fun. All right. Well, now for the two less interesting people to sign off. Sly, what are you doing? What do you got going on?
Well, you can find me at twitch.tv/Sly, aka Gray Fox. You can find me on Twitter at Sly the Fox. I will be doing Deep Dungeon when it comes out, and I will be probably angry as fuck. So. If you, put it like this, there's a reason I have that bar. So, and I'm sponsored by beer. So, I'll be doing it. I'll be doing it when it comes out. For now, though, get into a Total War, Warhammer.
Have fun with that.
Yeah, boy. Haps, Mr. Octopath.
Yeah,
what's going on?
That's what I got going on. It's Octopath. I'm still working on all my trophies for Theater Rhythm as well.
Theater Rhythm.
Yeah, I've played all 385 base songs at this point and played through all the quests and everything, but I still have a bunch of missions that need doing. But right now, Octopath is the primary goal. I made sure in my totally 3-hour long demo that was only allowed to be 3 hours, as the game tells you itself. I took my level 69 characters into the full game, and now I'm just exploring everything to find it all. So that's very much 3 hours. It's you could just stay in a dungeon.
It's not.
Yeah, no, you could just stay in a dungeon until. You until you leave, and it won't ever kick you out. So that's a little life hack with that one. But after that, I'll be doing Deep Dungeon. I probably will be doing Paladin, so I'll be trying to solo, not competitively, but I'm going to be going ham. So I guess that's as competitive as can be. And obviously, we have an exciting rest of the year. FanFest in a few months, 16's in basically 3 months at this point. There's still another Savage tier, another Criterion to come out.
So.
What did you just say?
Armored Core.
I don't know what words are coming out of your mouth. There's sounds.
Armored Core.
Oh, Armored Core. Oh, it doesn't sound like Armored Core to me. Yeah, we don't know when that's. I'm not expecting that till like November. I'm going to be patient with Armored Core 6, but yeah, that's another big one. And again, thanks to our sponsors over on Patreon for supporting. They don't have to, but they choose to, and we appreciate that. And of course, Steel Series and Advanced GG as well. With that, we're going to go into a short post show and just talk for a few minutes before I sign off, because I have something I have to do. And thanks again, everyone, for taking your time. Thanks everyone who tuned in to watch this show, and hopefully you're looking forward to Eureka. We will potentially see you next week. I'll talk with Sly about that afterwards. But thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Until then, we bid you adieu. And I just remembered I should buy myself another second, because it's the wrong outro, and I don't want to post the wrong one. Hold on. I have the right one, but listen, I was doing it here. Okay, there we go.
Wait for it, everybody.
No,
Bye-bye.
there it is. Look, see, it's the right one. There it is. See, it wasn't wrong ever, so we're good. Bye-bye.